Alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. It's me, Addy, again. And today I'm here with another impressions video, this time on Lies of P, a beautiful Souls-like game that was released in its full state a couple of days ago. Now, this is a title whose demo we played back in June, and yesterday I played the full release of this game for about 3 to 4 hours, and worked my way a little past the introductory demo section and into the level that immediately followed it. And I gotta say that right from the get-go, I was hooked. For context, I am an avid fan of the Soulsborne series of games developed by FromSoftware, with Bloodborne actually being my second favorite game ever made. And I think that I can speak for everyone who adores Bloodborne as much as I do when I say that for years, we have been yearning for either a sequel, remaster, or something that follows up on the terrifically twisted gothic hell that FromSoftware painted with their Lovecraftian masterpiece. And after my 5 hours of playing through the entirety of Lies of P's demo back in June, I think I can pretty confidently say that it took us 8 years, but we finally have a game that is as close as we can possibly get to a spiritual successor of Bloodborne, which is saying a lot considering that, number one, this isn't a game by FromSoftware, it's by a smaller, relatively unknown developer based in South Korea called Round 8 Studio, and number two, this is a rendition of Pinocchio, the classic beloved tale for children. But when you factor in trademark elements that give Bloodborne its distinct identity, such as the post-apocalyptic gothic setting, the eerie steampunk machinations, and this overwhelming sense of Eldritchian dread with small sparks of humanity, what you get, aesthetically, is an amazing love letter to a beloved video game, which, once again, comes as such a big surprise to me, given that how many of us knew about Round 8 and their games before? Like, when I look up what they made besides this, there's really not much of anything. So to me, it's pretty astonishing how, for a first attempt and with such a small resume, they were able to so flawlessly knock it out of the park when it came to paying homage to one of the greatest games of all time. So what is the premise of Lies of P? As I mentioned earlier, it's a dark and macabre reimagining of Carlo Collodi's Adventures of Pinocchio, where you play as a titular puppet who possesses the ability to lie. As Pinocchio, you work your way through the desolated city of Krat, which has been overrun by rampant puppets who revolted against their human creators, all whilst a horrible disease has taken hold of the city. Sound familiar in the coolest way possible? Huh, I wonder why. But in this horrible world, Pinocchio remains the only one with some semblance of a soul, and must fight through these terrors while encountering many familiar characters and themes that you may recognize if you're familiar with his tale, such as Geppetto, the Fairy, and Gemini, who've all been implemented in so many cool and interesting ways in this game. And what's really neat about it all is that Pinocchio's ability to lie factors into the gameplay as well, with how you can make certain dialogue choices based on this, which lends itself to the already well-realized NPC interactions that are present in this game, all of which have been done with great voice acting. On top of creating a thrilling world, Lies of P nails the Soulsborne formula with a nigh-perfect understanding of it as well. When I played the game back in June, it didn't take long for me to realize that I was playing my favorite Souls-like, of which there have been many that have attempted to recreate the magic of FromSoftware's own titles over the years, but have only gotten so far. Lies of P, however, features almost every single detail that you could expect out of a Soulsborne game, short of the multiplayer, and to a scary extent as well, where I had to question if someone would be able to tell that this wasn't a game by FromSoftware if they played it without knowing. Absolutely everything in this game, from the HUD design to the world building, is engineered and implemented virtually the exact same way as in an actual Soulsborne game. Hell, even the concept of chasing tiny creatures and killing them for upgrade materials is present in this experience. But the icing on the cake here to me personally was the level design. Of all the Souls-like games that I've played, few have managed to actually let me experience the joy of traversing a tight, interconnected world with satisfying shortcuts and interesting paths that reward your curiosity. But Lies of P knocks it out of the park in this department. It once again so heavily parallels Bloodborne, where you're venturing through these dark, dilapidated streets with nothing but bloodthirsty and terrifying fiends around you, where you'll only get brief moments of respite either at your various checkpoints, which are called stargazers in this game, or when you've unlocked shortcuts back to these stargazers, which eagerly await your arrival while you're off exploring every nook and cranny in the level that almost always rewards you with some special item or hidden area. And so far, I'm noticing a good bit of aesthetic variety as well, given that I've worked my way through disturbing urban districts, a relaxing lavish hotel which serves as your safe zone, and a smoky industrial complex. Almost no space is wasted in this game, and at no point do you feel lost or uncertain as to where to go. Everything has been paved so wonderfully here for the player, and it's just so satisfying to work through. And the gameplay in the midst of it all is exceptionally fun as well, since it once again taps into the heavily familiar and esteemed RPG mechanics that were present in the Soulsborne games, where you'll slice and dice through various foes with various builds in order to accrue souls, called Ergo in this game, which you can then use to level up at a special vendor and augment different stats that your character possesses, many of which are identical to and are laid out the exact same way as in a Soulsborne title. However, with this game's unique spin on the formula, with it being a retelling of Pinocchio's tale, you're obviously not going to be creating your very own character from scratch. You're roleplaying specifically as Pinocchio, so everything from his stats to the pace at which he attacks with each weapon is going to be based on his stature as a puppet. And despite this game having a good bit of build variety with its light and heavy offerings, what's interesting is how whenever you attack with weapons as Pinocchio, his motions will always feel like they have a bit of slow jitteriness to them, which in a way is really cool considering that he's a wooden creation who's naturally going to move in slightly unnatural ways. So I would say to not go into this game expecting the pacing of the combat to be akin to that of Bloodborne, where things are incredibly fast-paced, despite the uncanny amount of similarities we established earlier. But there are a lot of aspects of Bloodborne's combat that Lies of P does derive inspiration from, such as the ability to regain a small amount of health shortly after an enemy has attacked you by quickly counterattacking, being able to quick step when locking onto enemies, and your success in battle being primarily contingent on how well you can parry, which in this game is based on perfect blocking. And then there's a really satisfying stagger system where once you parry and damage an enemy enough, you can follow up with a mighty attack with some insanely cool animations that shatter your opponent into literal pieces. The game's own tiny gimmicks are really cool too, like the ability to regain healing items by hitting enemies enough times once you've run out of them. And the elephant in the room worth mentioning is that just like with any Soulsborne game, Lies of P is definitely no walk in the park, as most of the bosses and basic enemies, who've all been brilliantly designed here, definitely pull no punches. However, I will say that compared to the demo, they do feel a lot more fair in the final release. My only complaint with the demo was that the timing windows for the dodges and parries were a little too tight, and the boss attacks encompassed a radius too great, where I felt like it was almost impossible to get away from certain attacks, which was a tad bit frustrating. But I'm happy to say that in the final release, these problems have been largely alleviated, and as such, it took me approximately 2.5 hours as compared to the original 5 in order to get through the introductory portion of this game, which served as the demo, given that I was wrecking up these bosses much faster this time around. Another thing that's really dope in Lies of P is how Pinocchio possesses a special Legion arm which can be swapped out as you progress through the game, with each arm offering unique special attacks, such as a hook shot that pulls enemies towards you, and an electrical blast that deals extra damage to puppet-based enemies. And the basic weapons you get as well, such as, your standard clubs, axes, rapiers, and claymores, offer a good degree of customization with how you don't just get to simply upgrade them, but also mix and match their various parts. For example, you can detach the handle off your rapier to equip it on the base of a blunt electric coil in order to create a lighter weapon that still deals a good bit of electric damage, which is pretty freaking awesome. And each of these weapons come with their own unique fable arts as well, which are kind of like the weapon arts in Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, except here you have two for each weapon. One that you can trigger normally, and another one while defending, which allow you to pull off some awesome looking magical attacks and buffs. And once again, these can be swapped around depending on how you've modified the various heads and handles of your weapon, which I thought was really neat. Lies of P also has an insanely cool upgrade system where you can modify Pinocchio's literal organs with the help of Geppetto in order to grant him various passive skills and bonuses, and on top of this, the cosmetic customization is pretty crazy too, with how you can deck out Pinocchio in various colorful outfits and articles that thankfully have no impact on his actual stats, with those actually being influenced by the various frames you'll equip on Pinocchio. So yeah, there's a pretty crazy amount of stuff in this game that pretty clearly mimics and expands upon what we love about a classic Soulsborne game, even visually, given how this game looks incredible. It looks like such a visual upgrade over the classic Soulsborne titles that we're used to. And since we're in that realm, I'll touch a bit on the performance. This game runs buttery smooth. I was at a stable 60 frames per second. I played this on PC, and I did encounter a single frame drop throughout my entire time playing it last night. It has been very well optimized, and you will have a good time playing this regardless of whether or not you're at the recommended specs or going above and beyond. It's just so refreshing to see a well optimized PC port, in a sea of mediocrity in that regard these days. This is a straight up sequel that's not by FromSoftware themselves, and I think that's the best way I can describe Lies of P. So many of the aforementioned iterations that it makes aren't just there to make gameplay more fun, but are also there to refine many of the elements that FromSoftware established within their beloved subgenre. For example, this game makes some huge quality of life improvements, like tiny notification markers that alert you about certain dialogue options you haven't chosen yet with NPCs, and certain areas that you should maybe fast travel to in order to take care of any pending side quests, which, speaking of the latter, have been wonderful in this game so far. I know I keep mentioning Bloodborne, but that game has some of my favorite side quests in any game that I've ever played, and so far I've only done one side quest in Lies of P close to the beginning that reminded me so much of a particular quest that took place during Bloodborne's introductory segment as well. And that makes me appreciate this world so much more. There are just so many intriguing, thrilling, and disturbing things going on in Lies of P's world that remind me of my second favorite game ever made. And I simply can't wait to continue playing it, especially since I'm so eager to see how this game adapts so many of the standout and iconic moments in Pinocchio's story within this really demoralizing setting. It is a Bloodborne fan's dream come true, and is a game you'll hear zero complaints from me about, at least given my experience with it so far. And based on my initial impressions, I would say that if you love FromSoftware's games, particularly Bloodborne, and have been looking to scratch that itch that their games have left you with, regardless of whether or not you're a fan of Pinocchio, then you should absolutely pull the trigger with Lies of P. But anyways, folks, that's it for me today. If you enjoyed this impressions video, please do leave a like on it and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And do stop by twitch.tv/irritableiNdian if you'd like to catch my live playthrough of this game. Link is in the description. Now, I also just want to give you folks a big thank you for over 3,000 views on my previous impressions video, which was on Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, and for the positive response and discourse in its comments section. You guys are awesome, so stay happy, stay healthy, stay positive, and as always, keep on keeping on.